Michael and Reddy right now is King Kong. And I would say Al Jr. is Godzilla.
I would think she's quite confident. Her smaller fingers could get in somewhere where maybe a larger finger couldn't.
Motoring 91 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.
This week we're in the hospital ward for automobiles. Hello everybody and welcome to Motoring at 91. All around me are cars with different ailments that need tending to. We're in the garage area of the Addison dealership in downtown Toronto. And later on we're going to meet one of the mechanics. And you know, in a male-dominated business, this young lady is doing okay. But first we're going to join Steve Grant, and he has a story about a driver who is bringing just a little bit of Hollywood to the IndyCar series.
When they came up with the word confidence, they must have been thinking of this guy. William Theodore Ribbs Jr. is a race car driver, long on talent and even longer on ambition.
If I was to give you a report card on my life and my career, I would say a B+, because I haven't done it all yet. I'm getting better, you know, you get better as life goes on, and it's too early to give myself an A yet.
But Willy T. Ribbs now finds himself in a different grade, and getting that A won't be easy. After winning more Trans Am races than anyone ever, Willy T is now a rookie on the IndyCar circuit.
The first time we put him in a race car was at a test in October of last year at Memphis. It's his first time he'd had a seat in an IndyCar since 1985, and he surprised me how quickly he became comfortable in the race car, and he went very, very fast.
It works!
It's not often IndyCar racing is the lead story on Entertainment Tonight, but that's what happens when Bill Cosby signs on as a team owner. It was exactly the break Willy T. Ribbs was hoping for.
And it was like a message. It was like it came down. There was two people I knew that could do this, God and Cosby. And what was very, very important to me was that Willie said, it's an excellent car.
Bill is a friend of mine, and he's like my second father and mentor. And he, you know, I don't think I would have made it in IndyCar racing without him.
Being a rookie on the IndyCar circuit is tough enough, but for Willy T. Ribbs, he faces an uphill battle in more ways than one. He's driving last year's car. The power is judd. I mean, even the uniforms are a year old. And Bill Cosby's help or not, it's going to be tough to run with the pack.
You don't have a chance to beat Chevrolets. I mean, a Judd can't even luck into winning a race because there's too many Chevys out there. You know, it's my first year, and you know, you got to be realistic. It's a learning experience. But in order for me to be competitive, I'm going to have a Chevrolet, no question. Every team, any team who wants to be competitive has got to have that. Race by race, Michael and Reddy right now is King Kong. And I would say Al Jr. is Godzilla. And that's what I want for the future. I want to be able to have equal material to compete with the real top cast.
In the meantime, Willie has plenty of support on the sidelines from brother Philip and Willy T. Ribbs Sr.
I don't worry about him. I have enough confidence in his driving that it doesn't bother me at all. Well, this is what he loves to do, and he's a very safe driver. He doesn't crash cars, so you know you have confidence in him when, if he doesn't come around, you say, I wonder what broke this time, you know. His mother doesn't feel the same way. Of course, she's a mother, and she has confidence in him, but she's a mother, and she's very nervous.
So you won't see Mrs. Ribbs down here today?
No, she doesn't come to the races.
Do you feel any pressure that you're a role model for other blacks?
No.
Not at all?
I have no responsibility to anyone but myself and my team and Bill Cosby and the people who I represent. That's my major responsibility. As far as being a role model is concerned, if there is someone out there, both whether they're an adult or they're a child, that likes the way I do things, then that's great and that's beautiful, and maybe I help someone see a direction in life. But I'm not ever going to get into a race car or be in this profession feeling that I am a role model and I must be a leader, you know what I mean? We live a very short life. Man does not live long. And as long as I am here, I want it to be good.
The Escort has been one of the world's favourite cars for many years, and this, the latest edition, should continue the trend.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
On this week's Test Drive, we look at the latest edition of the world's hottest selling automobile, the 1991 Ford Escort. The Escort has been one of the world's favourite cars for many years. This, the latest edition, should continue the trend. This model is based upon the Mazda 323. Mazda contributed the floor pan, suspension, and if you opt for the GT, they also supplied the engine. Ford supplied the styling, the final suspension specifications, and of course the 1.9 litre engine. All models are offered with Mazda's manual transmission or Ford's optional 4-speed automatic. The new body styling boasts two benefits. Firstly, the lower hood and belt line increase the glass area, which improves all-round visibility. Secondly, the lower drag coefficient and semi-flush fitting glass reduce the amount of wind noise evident on the highway. The powertrain in our test Escort was Ford's 1.9 litre engine coupled with a 5-speed standard transmission. In the race to 100 kilometers an hour, the 88 horsepower generated feels a lot peppier than it actually proved to be. This is due mainly to the huge amount of torque generated in the lower RPMs. At highway speeds, however, the engine has a tendency to run out of breath, making the top-end performance somewhat leisurely. A full complement of passengers and/or luggage really compounds this situation. More on this later. During the brake test, the rear brakes displayed a tendency to lock prematurely. The result is that the car begins to slide to the right side just as it reaches a full stop. In bad weather conditions, this could prove more than a little inconvenient, especially in panic situations. The suspension setup is a Mazda design that has been tuned to Ford specifications. Sway bars at both ends help limit the amount of body roll. In the pylon test, the Escort put on a good show, managing to maintain a fairly level attitude throughout. However, when pushed hard, the tyres tend to give out long before the suspension does. Inside, the cabin is well laid out and very well finished. The dash features a basic set of analog gauges. They are easy to read and impart all the relevant information readily. The only comment here is that a rev counter would have been nice in the models equipped with a manual transmission. Elsewhere, the radio and heater controls are well placed and readily accessible. The seats are well contoured and provide plenty of comfort, and the cruise control functions are conveniently housed in the steering wheel hub. The fit and finish of this new Escort is the equal of any Japanese car I've tested. This bodes well for Ford because cars that are put together well tend to stay together well. This in turn helps to eliminate the aggravation associated with repeated repairs for minor items. The biggest advantage of any hatchback is obviously versatility. The Escort is no exception. It features a removable privacy cover, split folding rear seats, as well as a neat handle on the tailgate that makes closing it a snap. If hatchbacks aren't your cup of tea, check out the Mercury Tracer, because it is basically the same car, only with a trunk. It's time for this week's pet peeve, and on the Escort it's to do with the 1.9 litre engine and its 88 horsepower. Now for the most part it's adequate, but if you use the 4-door, 5-seater capacity on a regular basis, you're going to find it lacks a lot. So I was disappointed that Ford haven't allowed you to upgrade to the available 127 horsepower engine that you'll find in the Escort GT. Doing that would have solved this criticism. Now to the scoreboard and see how I rated the rest of the 1991 Ford Escort. For an affordable family sedan, the Escort really handles very well. It also manages to offer a great deal of comfort. Despite the relatively low horsepower output, the Escort manages to run to 100k in just over 10 seconds. Around town, the high torque output is really appreciated, especially with all members of the family on board. The fact that the rear brakes have a tendency to lock up just as you reach a stop is off-putting. I suspect this fault, though, is more to do with the car we tested than it is a trait of the model line. We managed to haul the Escort to a stop in about 118 feet, which is not too bad. The Escort is generally a quiet car. We measured an interior noise level of 71 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour. 70 decibels is the benchmark by which we judge the vehicles. In combined city highway driving, we averaged an excellent 34 miles per gallon, making this one of the more fuel-efficient vehicles around at the moment. The Escort has all the ingredients to make it a huge success. The fit and finish is excellent, the economy is right, as is the price. It will be interesting to see just how well it fares against some very stiff competition.
Well, we're back at the car dealership, and in just a few minutes we're going to meet one of the few female mechanics in this business. But first, I'd like you to meet mechanic Darren Smith. Darren, if I can just bother you for just a minute, what exactly are you doing here right now?
Well, actually, in this case, basically simple. We're replacing the engine because of a coolant leak, dealing with the expansion of the aluminum block and intake manifold with cast iron heads. It allows some movement, takes the gasket out of it. Coolant will get in the engine, destroy it from there. So we're basically just replacing it for that reason, I guess.
Okay, that's pretty easy to understand, I think. But I know one fellow, another mechanic, who certainly can understand what Darren just said. That, of course, is Motoring 91's resident mechanic, Bill Gardner.
Now, if you're like me or many other service guys, you may have the attitude that front-wheel drive cars pose a little bit more difficulty in service. Some things are a little bit more difficult, and other things are easier. For example, front wheel bearings have changed drastically with front-wheel drive cars. They've been out for years now, but you may not be familiar with the layout. There really is no service or maintenance to these. There's no adjustment or re-lubrication required, but the procedure to replace them is quite a bit different. The bearing looks drastically different, and it costs a lot more than it used to. Now, we're talking about the wheel bearings on these front-wheel drive cars. One thing they have changed dramatically is the way we go about brake servicing because of these type of bearings. The caliper, we've already removed the high tensile bolts and swung it aside. You can see that the rotor now comes off very easily. It just slides off the hub without touching any bearings, adjusting nuts, or messing with any lubricant. It's made that aspect of brake servicing much easier. If we want to resurface the rotor or change it, it's just a straight on and off. Now we can see the hub here and 2 of the 3 bolts that retain the wheel bearing assembly to the spindle. The third one's down here. Now, when we replace this bearing, it's going to come as a complete assembly. Here's one right here. This is a used one. But you can see the layout. There's the 3 mounting bosses that secure the bearing into the spindle. And we get a new hub and a bearing assembly all complete. Now, this part's worth about $150. It comes with the hub and studs. You can see the other end of the splines here. Now, with an expensive unit like this, you want to make very sure that you diagnose this properly and change only the bad ones when necessary. There's no maintenance required, no repacking or adjusting. If it's bad, you replace it. That's it. Now, this is the type of wheel bearing that most of you will be familiar with. A tapered roller bearing, or sometimes referred to as a cup and cone bearing. We've pulled out the cotter pin. I'm going to slide the adjuster shell off and the lock nut. Now, this lock nut not only secures the bearing onto the spindle, but it also provides the adjustment. The number of turns we put on this nut will determine that adjustment. And usually the spindle is drilled in one or more places so that we've got an infinite number of positions that we can lock it off in to get that adjustment. Now, we're going to slide the outer bearing out. The thrust washer and bearing will be visible. This is the thrust washer and the outer wheel bearing, that tapered roller bearing we talked about. You can see that it's greasy. This one's in good shape. And this bearing will have to be periodically repacked with fresh grease or sometimes cleaned out and re-greased and adjusted, of course. We'll pull the hub off, the drum assembly, and you can see the race that bearing runs in there. That's a replaceable component, comes with a new bearing. These bearings are fairly inexpensive, about $15. We turn the hub and drum around and you can see the seal, which is another separate part, $6 or $7 component, and the inner wheel bearing, which is a slightly larger tapered roller bearing. That's also easily replaceable. These bearings can be washed out, re-greased, and repacked, reused in most cases. Now, how do you determine if and when you have to service or replace those wheel bearings? Well, the most obvious thing as far as replacement would go would be a noise. By the time you hear a noise in that wheel bearing, it's already failed. The noise is usually a rumble or a groaning noise, and it's most obvious at about 30 to 60 kilometer zone. The next step is to hoist the car up and try and determine which wheel is producing the noise. You can usually get an idea by checking for lash in the wheel. If you find one wheel with an awful lot of slop in it, that's probably the one with the bad bearing, and that's where you should look first. Sometimes you can get a good idea just by cornering the car, throwing it back and forth. You can determine which corner of the car the noise is coming from. At that stage of the game, you're looking at likely replacing the bearing with a new one and any of the seals involved with that job, and repacking any other bearings that are a serviceable type bearing. Until next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 91.
If you have any comments or suggestions, drop us a line at Motoring 91, Post Office Box 284, Station J, Toronto, Ontario, M4J 4Y1.
You know, as I mentioned earlier, the job of repairing cars has been, well, male-dominated. But as Karen Horsman is now going to tell us, the status quo ain't what it used to be.
When Fleur Jauvert arrives for another day at the office, you won't find her in front of a computer screen or in a boardroom. Fleur pulls on her coveralls and gets to work on her latest project, a Pontiac 6000.
The cars, I'd grown up on a farm and had the horses then, and in the city no horses, so I guess I turned to the horsepower with the cars and got into it there. And I'd spent so much time out at Mosport timing these race cars and trying to get into the field of auto racing. And it really was knocking my head against a corporate wall, and sat back for a few years, thought about it and thought, well, if I go through with the mechanics and I've got some of the driving, then eventually maybe I can pull the two together into a testing and development situation.
We have felt that she's an asset to the company. She is committed to the industry, and she doesn't mind getting in there and solving a problem. Throughout her schooling and her in-house work that she did, she excelled both in repairing cars and being committed to that, and also her marks from the General Motors program were in the A category.
You don't see that many women, and you don't think that they're really capable of doing the job. It's a lot of physical work and dirty.
Well, it was kind of weird at first. I didn't really sort of got used to it until after about a couple of months, and but it's fun working with her. She helps me, I help her.
When customers do notice me, yeah, you get the odd guy who doesn't really want to know too much, sort of come over and look and peek over you and sort of walk away with his hands behind his back. You get women coming over, are you lady mechanic? Get a lot of people coming in for just things like air in their tires of their bicycles, and they say, oh, hi, good to see you working here.
Now you have to remember there's a lot more to Fleur than just cars and the auto repair shop. I mean, remember, this is a woman that grew up on a farm and she used to be a hairdresser. So when she leaves the shop, there's a lot more to her life. Fleur may be taking a huge step forward for the women's movement, but that doesn't mean everyone's patting her on the back. That includes her boyfriend.
Well, when I first met Fleur, I thought it was really interesting, and I sort of told everyone about my girlfriend being the mechanic, and then I would say it took a few times her coming home with smelling like basically an exhaust pipe, and for me to kick her into the shower, and after that, she's back to Fleur. So to me, it's a job. Fleur does her job, and apparently she does it well, so to me, that's Fleur the mechanic.
The Magic Phony is the perfect communications tool for the person who's tough to reach.
Yeah, Priscilla, I got it today. It's a great phone. I gotta go.
Best of all, the Magic Phony saves you hundreds of dollars in installation charges. There are no holes to drill or nails to pound, thanks to the unpatented rapid adhesive system. No matter where you are, there's no fading, interference, or irritating static. Just crystal clear silence. You too can look like a mover and shaker with the Magic Phony. The communications gizmo that keeps you in style without keeping you in touch. Batteries, microchips, and transistors not included or necessary.
Nice cars, BMWs, but let me tell you about some of their owners next on Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
I attended an advanced driver training school for BMW owners a couple of years ago, and the first thing the instructor told his assembled multitudes is, "Gentlemen, the first thing we do is turn on our headlamps, and the second thing we do is turn off our fog lamps." And I wonder if BMW owners drive around in a perpetual fog. And why else would they always drive with their auxiliary lights on, even in the daytime? Do they have a part-time job providing lighting for rock concerts? Now, I shouldn't pick on BMW owners only here. VW GTIs and IROC Camaros, Firebird Trans Ams, Mustang GTs, they're all just as bad. But please, gentlemen, fog lamps are for fog, and they only work if your headlights are off and if the lights themselves are perfectly adjusted with a nice flat beam that just skims the surface. But to tell you the truth, I live in a foggy part of the country, and I've driven hundreds of cars with fog lamps, and I've yet to come up with a single circumstance where fog lamps work better than regular low beams. I have to admit, though, fog lamps look really cool. So, look cool if you must, but do us retina-burned victims a favor. Turn the stupid things off. This is Jim Kenzie in Kenzie's Corner.
Have you ever noticed that no matter how many garages you go into, the mechanics seem to have the same appreciation for art? That's it, for art. Well, that is it for now. We want to thank all the guys and the girls here at Addison for allowing us to peek over their shoulder. We'll see you next week, though, for more stories on Motoring 91.
Motoring 91 has been brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.